Leadership is everywhere, but trustworthy leadership is becoming harder to find. We live in a time where people can rise because of talent, charisma, position, or ambition. But without character, accountability, and integrity, leadership begins to break down. The result? Broken trust, discouraged teams, wounded communities, and people searching for leaders they can truly believe in. This is why I wrote Leadership Crisis, because the greatest challenges facing leadership today are not always a lack of ability. They are often the hidden character gaps that shape how leaders use their influence. In the work edition of Leadership Crisis, I confront the patterns that weaken leaders and organizations: poor character, emotional immaturity, manipulation, favoritism, and resistance to accountability. Through practical insights, real life scenarios, and reflection questions, this book challenges leaders to examine not only what they do, but who they are becoming while they lead. Inside, you will discover why integrity, not charisma, is the foundation of influence, how unhealthy leadership patterns destroy credibility, and practical tools to build trust, empower people, and create healthier cultures. In the church edition of Leadership Crisis, it addresses the need for Christ like leadership within the body of Christ. It examines the impact of pride, favoritism, manipulation, and a lack of accountability while pointing leaders back to Jesus, the ultimate model of servant leadership. Through biblical insight, case studies, and reflection questions, this edition invites pastors, ministry leaders, and believers called to influence others to embrace humility, integrity, accountability, and faithful service. Whether you lead in a workplace, a ministry, a classroom, a nonprofit, or your community, Leadership Crisis will challenge you to move beyond position and pursue transformation. Because leadership is not about titles, it is not about control, it is not even about being seen as powerful. Leadership is about character, and character determines whether your influence creates harm or leaves a legacy. Get your copy of Leadership Crisis by Dr. Nashana Holmes today. Remember, the future of leadership will not be changed by simply creating more leaders. It will be changed by developing leaders of character. Don't forget to purchase your copy on Amazon. Hey, Dr. Nashana here. Welcome back to Lead with Clarity. We're moving on to episode 2. Episode 1 really had us dig into some of our blind spots, and now we're going to dig a little deeper. But before we even get into our topic for this week, I want to remind you of my focus. My focus is character centered leadership development. And basically, that's just an approach to leadership growth that really focuses on developing the internal qualities, values, and self awareness of the leader before focusing only on external skills and strategies. It recognizes that effective leadership is not just about what a leader does, it begins with who the leader is becoming. Leadership is an outward expression of an inward foundation. I'm very passionate about this type of work. I'm very, very passionate about character centered leadership development because I really sincerely believe that the leadership crisis we see today is not simply a competency issue, it is a character issue. We have taught people how to lead, but we must also teach them who to become while they lead, right? Character shapes decisions, relationships, culture, and it has an overall impact. My work focuses on developing leaders from the inside out, helping them build the self awareness, integrity, emotional maturity, and accountability needed to lead with clarity, purpose, and lasting influence. So here we go. Here's episode 2. Today I'm going to be talking about, are you leading from purpose or your wounds? Even before I begin, let's just take a deep breath. This topic is going to be a lot. But I'm hoping that by the end of it, you will feel inspired to do your work to help you to lead with clarity. Not every leader is leading from vision. Some are leading from survival. Some are leading from the need to be accepted, the need to be needed, or even the need to be admired. And sometimes what we call passion is actually pain in disguise. Here's a difficult truth, you guys. You can be gifted, successful, and deeply wounded at the same time. So then the question is not really whether you're leading. The question should be what's leading you. Now let's talk about wounds. All right, we all know what wounds are. And when I say wounds, right, I'm talking about those inner things that are going on beneath the surface, right? So I want you to visualize again the iceberg from episode 1, the above water and below water. So wounds would be below water. And thing about wounds is that wounds don't stay personal. They actually become organizational, right? And what I mean is that leaders don't leave their unresolved issues at the door when they step into leadership. Whatever is happening internally will eventually influence the people, culture, and the systems they lead, right? So think about it this way: leadership is multiplication. If you're healthy, you multiply health. But if you're insecure, fearful, or unhealed, you often multiply those things as well. What you don't heal will eventually show up in your leadership. And sorry for that. I just wanted to make sure I said that like really profound. But think about it, right? What you don't heal, it shows up in your decisions, your relationships, your communication, your leadership culture as a whole, right? So here are some examples. The insecure leader creates an insecure culture. So a leader who secretly struggles with insecurity may feel threatened by talented team members, avoid hiring people who are more knowledgeable than they are, become defensive when challenged, or basically just need to be the smartest person in every room they sit in. The organization suffers, right? Because people learn that it's not safe to shine when a leader is insecure. Team members stop sharing ideas, innovation decreases, and everyone learns to play small to protect the leader's ego. The wound wasn't organizational to begin with, remember? This started on the inside, it was personal. But when you become a leader and you don't work on healing this wound, now the entire team operates under it. And we all can think of an insecure leader, right? Where their decisions and everything that they do is based on their insecurity, right? Another example is the rejected leader creates a culture of people pleasing. If a leader has experienced rejection and has never dealt with it, right? Because we all will experience rejection. As humans, we all will. The key is that you have to deal with the rejection. But if the leader doesn't deal with the rejection, they may avoid difficult conversations. They may refuse to hold people accountable. They may overextend themselves to make everyone happy, and then they most likely will say yes when they should say no. Now, what happens to the organization with this? We have unclear, right? Unclear expectations. We have inconsistent standards, right? And a whole buildup of frustration, right? And frustration actually comes about because problems are ignored rather than addressed, right? The leader isn't being nice. They're just protecting themselves from the discomfort of potentially disappointing others. That's the wound, right? Another wound that can come up, or is an example of a wounded leader, is a leader who often creates systems that protects their wounds. This is so dangerous. And this is something that many people never really consider. You don't consider it. You don't consider if you struggle with trust issues, how that can show up in your leadership, right? Now, how this shows up, this could show up like you require approval for everything. No one can ever take initiative. You micromanage your staff or your team. You resist delegating important responsibilities. You keep decision making centralized, right? Now, what happens to the organization when this happens? Processes are slow, team members, employees are frustrated, and there's low morale. So people may say, our organization has a communication problem. No, 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 no. The organization may actually have an unresolved leadership wound that's masquerading as communication problems. Let's think about that. Wow. You have to remember that your team often experiences what you refuse to examine. Now, one of the major things that we should really, really dig into before we even look at to see if we have any signs of this in our leadership is we really have to think about what's driving our leadership, right? Many leadership issues are symptoms rather than root problems. And we're specifically talking about wounds as being a symptom, right? How your wounds can become patterns and then your patterns become the reality. So if we look at this, let's break this apart some more and let's really dig into this whole concept of wounds, right? So different type of wounds we can have: fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of betrayal, need for validation, insecurity, and shame, right? These are all internal issues or unmet needs that can influence us as leaders. They can influence our behaviors, and they are often invisible to others and may even be invisible to the leader. Now, all of these wounds can exist internally in a leader. How does this look in your leadership behavior? Perfectionism, people pleasing, micromanagement, overworking, controlling behavior, or even avoiding vulnerability. All of those wounds now have transitioned into leadership behaviors. I want you to see that, right? So, what started internally can now manifest outwardly in a leadership, in a leader's behavior, right? And then we have what others experience from this leadership behavior, from perfectionism, constant pressure, right? From people pleasing, a lack of accountability, micromanagement, a lack of trust, overworking, unrealistic expectations, from controlling behavior, low psychological safety, and from the leadership behavior of avoiding vulnerability, disconnected relationships. Do you see how it started off as a wound? It manifested itself into a leadership behavior. And then now, those you lead have to experience it in this way. That's why it's important that we understand that if we heal the leader, we can change the leadership. That's why awareness is key. You have to be aware of how you lead. The most effective leadership development isn't only about learning new strategies, it's about becoming more self aware, emotionally healthy, and grounded in character. Now, let's be honest. Most leaders don't wake up thinking, I'm leading from my wounds. We none of us think that, right? Most of us basically probably simply believe this is just who I am. You ever heard a leader say that? This is just who I am. This is my leadership style. Now, I really, really want you to know that the goal of this conversation that I'm having is not to shame leaders at all. It's not to shame you if you are a leader. It's to help you recognize that behaviors are often symptoms of something bigger. Once you can pinpoint where your behavior comes from, then you can change it. If you never become aware of where internally your behavior stems from, then it will be difficult for you to lead with clarity. You can't. You can't. Now let's look at some signs that you could be leading from your wounds, right? And again, remember, I'm not trying to shame you. I'm trying to get you to do your work. That's it. That's all I want you to do. I want you to do your work and to be able to lead with clarity. So, one sign that you're leading from a wound is you take feedback personally. Healthy leaders are able to separate who they are from what they do. I'm going to repeat that again. Healthy leaders are able to separate who they are from what they do. Wounded leaders often can't. If you have a hard time with feedback, then that's letting you know that there is a wound somewhere in there, right? And this may look like when someone critiques your work, you may not hear, this presentation could be stronger. Instead, you hear, you're not good enough. That's a wound response, right? When feedback feels like rejection, leaders tend to become defensive, explain rather than listen, shut down emotionally, dismiss the person given the feedback, and avoid situations where they may be evaluated. And the problem isn't it really isn't feedback itself. It's what feedback touches inside of you. That's the problem. I want you to ask yourself, when someone gives you constructive criticism, do you become curious or do you become defensive? Feedback should feel uncomfortable at times. It really should. But it shouldn't feel threatening. If it feels threatening, then there may be an underlying wound that needs attention. Here's another sign that you could be leading from your wound. You struggle to delegate because control feels safe. Many leaders believe, oh, well, I just have high standards, right? And that may be true sometimes, right? But then sometimes the underlying thing is fear is disguised as excellence. You don't delegate because you're scared. Delegation requires trust. If you struggle to trust others, leadership can become exhausting because you feel responsible for everything. You may find yourself saying, it's faster if I do it myself. No one can do it the way I can. I need to approve everything. If I don't stay involved, things will fall apart. But here's the deeper question. What are you afraid will happen if you release control? Right? For some leaders, it can be failure. But then for others, it can be disappointment, it could be criticism, or even feeling unnecessary. Control often provides temporary emotional safety, but it creates organizational dysfunction. It has to. Your team is going to experience frustration, lack of empowerment, limited growth opportunities, right? Think about it. Healthy leaders don't need to control everything to feel secure. If you struggle with that, you need to do your work and find out what's the wound, right? Another sign you're leading from a wound is you need constant affirmation or recognition. Now think about it. We all as humans, even outside of leadership, we all appreciate encouragement, right? And there's nothing wrong with being recognized for your work. The issue is when affirmation becomes emotional oxygen, right? It's the only way you survive. That's when it becomes dangerous. I want you to ask yourself, do I become discouraged when people don't acknowledge my contributions? Do I feel overlooked when others receive recognition? Do I need people to tell me I'm doing a good job in order to feel valuable? Leaders who are often driven by validation, you often overcommit yourself and you say yes way too often. But then you feel resentful when your efforts aren't noticed as well, right? You attach your worth to your accomplishments. I want you to really think about this. What I'm going to ask you. If no one applauded your work for an entire year, would you still be confident in who you are? Purpose driven leaders are grateful for affirmation, but they are not dependent on it. Another sign that you're leading from a wound is you overwork because your value is tied to your performance. Now, this is really, really, really common among high achievers. Many successful leaders unknowingly live by this equation: my productivity equals my value, right? So basically, if I'm producing, I'm valuable. If I'm resting, I'm lazy. If I'm not accomplishing something, I'm falling behind. Now, what do you suffer with if this is if this is your wound? A lack of rest. You have no boundaries. You don't say no. You struggle with taking a break and vacations, right? You struggle with being fully present with family and friends. And this is all because your identity becomes intertwined with your performance, right? And I want you to ask yourself, who are you when you're not accomplishing anything? That's a very good, very difficult question to answer, right? And it's because, think about it, we've been conditioned to celebrate what people do more than who they are. Leadership should flow from identity, not determinant. Another sign that you're leading from a wound is you avoid difficult conversations because conflict feels unsafe. Many leaders pride themselves on being kind, right? Think about it. The average leader is kind, has some kindness, some compassion, right? And some leaders are really easy to work with. However, avoiding difficult conversations is not kindness. I'm going to say it again. Avoiding difficult conversations is not kindness. It is often self protection. Avoiding difficult conversations helps you to mask vulnerability, right? You don't have to be vulnerable. You avoid conflict, you don't have to be vulnerable, right? It protects you. Now, some leaders avoid conflict because they fear being disliked, they fear rejection, they fear disappointing others, and they fear emotional discomfort. But there is a huge cost of avoiding conflict. It is. Think about it. Think about your teams and those you lead. If you avoid conflict, I'm quite sure poor performance continues. Expectations are unclear. Healthy relationships actually suffer, and then resentment grows. Listen, conflict can be handled well, right? Conflict is not destructive, it doesn't have to be destructive. In fact, it can deepen trust and strengthen relationships. Here's a question I want you to ask yourself: are you protecting the relationship or are you protecting yourself from discomfort? That question usually reveals what's really happening beneath the surface. Wounded leaders make leadership decisions based on emotional safety. That's the whole point of this. I want to bring this all together. Healthy leaders make leadership decisions based on purpose and values. So when you lead from your wounds, you unconsciously ask yourself, what keeps me safe? What protects my image? What prevents discomfort? What helps me feel valuable? When you're leading from purpose, you unconsciously ask yourself, what serves the mission? What develops people? What aligns with my values? And then what produces healthy outcomes? See, the shift from wounded leadership to purposeful leadership begins with self awareness. The question isn't whether you have wounds. We all have wounds. Every leader has wounds. The question is whether your wounds are sitting quietly in the passenger seat or driving your leadership every day, right? So, this is what it means to lead with clarity. You are self aware of what is going on. In this case, you are self aware of your wounds, right? And it changes your wounds from being like character flaws, right? Once you become aware of them, it actually gives you an invitation for self awareness and growth. So even if listening to this is making you feel uncomfortable, and even if out of all those five you had four or three, or you even had all five signs applied to how you're leading from your wounds, it's okay. It's awareness. And self awareness helps you grow. Say that with me. Self awareness helps you grow. The more that you are aware of what's going on inside of you pertaining to your wounds, the more work you can do to help heal them. So now we talked about wounds and we talked about signs of wounds. Now let's talk about what leading from purpose looks like. Now, what does that look like? Now we identify our wounds, we know what they are. What do we have to do? Leading from purpose means that a leader is guided by a clear understanding of why they lead. You have to have a clear understanding of your values, your convictions, and the impact that you want to create, rather than being driven by recognition, power, fear, or the need to prove yourself. Purpose centered leaders focus on who they are becoming and who they are helping others become, right? Purpose driven leaders serve rather than seek significance, right? Purpose driven leaders, they don't need to feel important. They lead because they recognize they have something valuable to contribute. You understand that leadership is a responsibility, not a status symbol. Purpose driven leaders make decisions from conviction rather than fear. You make choices based on your values and long term vision, not temporary pressure or insecurity. Fear based leadership is a no no. Fear based leadership often sounds like, what would people think? How can I avoid criticism? How do I protect my position? Right? You shouldn't be asking yourself those questions. Purpose driven leaders ask themselves, what is the right thing to do? Does this decision align with our values? And then will this help people grow? You have to be willing to make difficult decisions because your commitment should be to purpose rather than fear of discomfort. Purpose driven leaders empower others instead of controlling them. Purpose driven leaders understand that leadership is not about having all the answers. I think I would drop a mic there too. I don't know why a lot of leaders think they're supposed to know everything. It's not about that. It's about developing people who can contribute, grow, and lead, right? You do not need to be involved in everything. You want to allow people to develop and you want to allow people to succeed without you, right? You want to be able to trust others with responsibilities. Right? Your main job, honestly, as a leader is to help people discover their potential, right? Great leaders do not create followers who depend on them, they develop leaders who can carry the mission forward. Purpose driven leaders welcome accountability. They recognize that growth requires honesty, right? You are willing to receive feedback, examine your actions, and make adjustments. Accountability should not be an attack on your authority. Let me say that again. Accountability is not an attack on your authority. A purpose driven leader sees accountability as a tool for becoming better. What can I learn from this? How did my action impact others? Where do I need to grow? Purpose driven leaders surround themselves with people who will change them, not just praise them. Purpose driven leaders welcome accountability, they welcome it. And then purpose driven leaders also know that their identity isn't attached to their title, right? Not at all. A position is something you hold, it is not who you are. When you attach your identity to a title, losing that position feels like you're losing value, right? And then criticism feels like rejection, and then success becomes about proving worth. When identity is grounded in purpose, a leader can serve with humility. They can transition in seasons without even losing confidence, and they can celebrate others without feeling threatened. A title gives you authority. Remember that. A title does give you authority, but character determines whether they are worthy of influence, right? Are you worthy of influence? And look at the core difference between this. Someone who is title driven asks, how can I maintain my position? But someone who is purpose driven asks, how can I use my influence to create meaningful impact? Right? When you're purpose driven, you lead from the inside out. Inside, inside out. You don't just simply lead people, you help people become who they are capable of becoming. That's wow, that's something. And this is why it's so important that you don't get caught up in titles. You really cannot get caught up in titles because the title is just something for, for your team to associate you as. But your actions and behaviors is what they're really, really, really adjusting to, right? It's so important. Let's do this visual really quickly to just show you how important this is, right? So imagine, close your eyes really quickly, really quickly. Imagine pouring water into a glass with a crack in it. You keep pouring more and more water, but you never repair the crack. So you're actually continuing to lose what's being poured in. Leadership works the same way. We often pour more training, more strategies, and more certifications into leaders without ever addressing the cracks beneath the surface. Here's a challenging question I want to pose for you. And I really want you to take your time and to sit down. And you can even pause this video after I ask this, and really reflect on this. If you sat down with the people you lead, what would they say they've had to adapt to because of you? Would it be strengths or would it be unhealed wounds? Now, this is a very powerful question. And the reason why I really like this question because it shifts the conversation. It shifts the conversation from what's wrong with my team to what might my team be carrying because of me. And a lot of leaders don't ask themselves that. There are some leaders that usually think that they're fine and that who they lead is not a reflection of them. And that's wrong. Who you lead is a reflection of you. Now, there are going to be some cases where there are going to be people who you lead that just don't want change, right? Just they haven't dealt with their own wounds, right? Um, but there's going to be a high percentage of people you lead that will be carrying things because of you. The truth is, organizations are often a reflection of the emotional and character health of their leaders. I'm going to say this again. Organizations are often a reflection of the emotional and character health of their leaders. And remember, there are different types of organizational structures. So we can be talking corporate America, we can be talking nonprofit, we can be talking about school leadership, we can be talking about church leadership. If you serve as a leader in any one of those organizations, I want you to know that is often a reflection of the emotional and character health of you. Healthy leaders build healthy cultures. Unhealthy patterns in leaders don't stay hidden. They become embedded in the systems, relationships, and experiences of the people they lead. This is why healing isn't just personal work for leaders, it's leadership work. This is a part of leadership. Today's topic has been a lot. I know it has been a lot to digest. And I want to leave you with some reflective questions that you can write down. And I invite you to answer them. Answer them in your journals. Even answer them in the comments if you want. Once you subscribe and to this channel, write down your comments. The best thing that you can do after a workshop is reflect. You should always reflect. Try to figure out, right? We learn the material. Now we want to apply the material. But before we can apply it, we have to reflect, see where we fall in line with it. So here are your reflective questions I want to leave you with. If I lost my title tomorrow, who would I be? Am I leading to serve or to prove something? What triggers me most as a leader? What am I protecting when I become defensive? What am I afraid people will discover about me? Reflect. Now, before we close, I just want to remind you that the greatest threat to your leadership isn't your lack of experience or education. It really isn't. It's the parts of yourself you've never invited into the healing process. Leadership doesn't reveal who you want people to think you are, it reveals who you actually are. When you heal, your leadership heals. When you grow, the people connected to your leadership benefit from your growth. You don't have to lead from your wounds. You can lead with clarity, purpose, and wholeness. Remember my motto: you can't change what you won't confront. I encourage you guys, keep leading with clarity, character, and purpose. Until next time, this is Dr. Nashana. See you in episode 3.